Put your hands on top of your head.
Well, I didn't.
Now!
And I'll bet your mother had a loud bark.
Good morning. This is Morning Coffee with the Chief. I'm your host, Patrick Jordan, here on Pop Culture Minefield. We also appear on Rumble every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, where we do this show where we go over a crime-related or cop-related movie. We review it. We talk about our own experiences. And then we also comment on the issues of the day. Now, before I get into my show, I always do my plug for the LA Mission. The LA Mission services the homeless in downtown LA, the Skid Row area. They've been doing it for 85 years. They serve over 400,000 meals a year to the homeless folks, and they provide some basic services, including shelter beds for a night. Now, I was just down in San Diego, and I have to tell you, I go down there a couple times a year. I go down, like I went down for St. Patrick's Day to take my uncle out for some corned beef and cabbage and a Guinness. And every morning I walk when I'm down there, and it in the years past, I could count the homeless in the dozens down in downtown LA and through the Gaslamp district, if you're familiar with San Diego. And this last time I went down, I think I counted 4 on one of my walks. And I usually do about a 5-mile walk. So I get all over the downtown area and the Gaslamp area and along the coast immediately in the San Diego area near downtown. And then I had to look it up. What are they doing? Well, they built more shelter beds and more temporary housing, something we need to do here in LA. And it's reduced the number of people that are on the streets in downtown the Gaslamp area by 60%, and it was really noticeable. So they're doing some really good work down there with the homeless in San Diego, but the key part of it is temporary shelter beds, which, unfortunately, our governor pushed the whole housing first instead of putting his money into temporary shelters, and I think we're lagging behind some of the other states. But anyways, the Los Angeles Mission has some of those temporary beds. They've expanded their capacity. They also have, beds that are for people who are long-term recovery, 6 to 12 months, and they give them wraparound services and help them to reintegrate into society. Regardless, the LA Mission does a great job, and it has a faith-based component. So I want you to do me a favor and look up the Los Angeles Mission. It's losangelesmission.org, and make a small donation to help out your fellow man today. Okay, so that's the LA Mission. Now, today's show, it's a movie called Rush, and it was released in 1991. It's a crime drama film, but it's based upon a book written by Kim Wozencraft, who was actually a police officer in Texas, a narcotics officer in Texas, who was taken straight out of the academy into narcotics. And it really talks about the addiction of her and her partner. Now, it's not a true story, but it is based upon her true experiences working narcotics in Texas. And I had some real issues with what I saw in the book, and I actually looked up the real story to get some of the straight scoop. But some of the actors involved are Jason Patrick. He played her partner, Jim Raynor, and it's Jennifer Lang played the detective, Christina Cates, in this movie. And I think it was Kim Ramsey was the name of the real name of the officer involved, and she took another name, Wozencraft, or got married to somebody else and changed her name. But this is basically out of Tyler, Texas. So it's a little different story, because for me, our narcotics in a county that has 10 million people and in LA that has 4 million people, it's a lot different than doing narcotics investigations in a small town. But today I got two folks that have worked narcotics that are going to be coming on to help me with the show. And the first one is somebody that's been around for a long time. He's been on my show before. He also was on my other show. I do have another show. It's Briefing with the Chief, which is on Gerry's Rumble channel every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So this one's Tuesday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. But my other show is Wednesday, 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on the Gerry Rumble channel. That's 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm getting all this mixed up. Anyways, Danny Coon has been on both of my shows, and he is a retired sergeant from Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. He's worked narcotics before, and I thought he would be a good guest to go over this because there is, in addition to working narcotics, Danny's familiar with, maybe some of the addiction issues and mental health issues that might come up with doing policing. Certainly doing policing in narcotics, regardless of what generation you do it in. Hey, Danny, how you doing?
I'm good, Chief. How are you today? And thank you for having me on again. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you. You always add good commentary. And I think it's going to be kind of an interesting show because there's a lot of directions we can go with this movie.
You know, when I went on loan to narcotics up in the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale area, right at the tail end of the Operation Big Spender, also known as Arco Narco.
Yeah.
And so I saw a lot of guys that got caught up in some messes, and they were the collateral damage from that investigation. And then I also had a friend of mine who we were academy mates, got picked out of the academy, and we'll talk about some of his issues because they coincide with some of the thought process on this movie.
Yeah, and I know what the most interesting thing is, and this is why I talk about narcotics and why I don't think legalizing narcotics is good, because it does undermine, in my opinion, it undermines the fabric of society. The more people are addicted, and yes, we do have a free society, but we expect everybody to, there's a social contract we have with each other, where everybody's doing the best they can to not only take care of themselves, but also help build a nation. And I think when you get addicted to drugs, and we got to carry you, because that's what ends up happening, you're not really fulfilling that end of the social contract, right? That's kind of how I see it. I mean, obviously we don't have to walk lockstep behind, together, but I think you need to be responsible about how you conduct yourself. And I just think narcotics and the addictive aspects of narcotics just destroys a person and does not allow them to fulfill their obligations, I think, to society, their families, and to themselves as individuals.
Yeah, that's true. Oregon has finally figured it out since they legalized just about everything, and now they realize, oops. So they're starting to reverse some of their really stupid policies, which is a good thing.
Yeah, well, we see some energy on Prop 47 here in California, but I don't know if we're there yet. Hey, let's bring on our second guest. I think he's in the green room, and this is a recently retired Captain, Marty Rodriguez from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. There he is.
Hey, good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Pat. Hey, Danny.
How you doing, Marty?
I'm doing well.
Good. Congratulations on retirement.
Thank you. Well, we're about 10 days away from it, but
okay. So
government work.
So yeah. Since you guys know each other and you both work narcotics, here's the safe word: no. That means, so if we bring up a subject you don't want to talk about, you just say no, okay, and we'll move on. All right.
No, we got dirt on each other from East LA, so
there's a lot of dirt. There's a lot of dirt here.
Well, hey, so you just got like a week to go before the final retirement date. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So it's March 30th, right?
March 30th. That's the official day for most deputy sheriffs.
Yeah. So I did 38 years. How many years did you do?
42. This will be 42 and some change.
So there is a slower learner than me, Danny. I just wanted to point that out to you, because I remember you talking about, it took you 38 years to figure out how to retire. Well, here's your friend Marty. It took him a little longer than me.
Yeah. Marty, unfortunately, since I've been on Pat's show before, he knows a lot of the crap I talk. So.
Yeah. Well, I finally read the expiration date, and I saw that it was about 5 years beyond its.
There's
Well,
a
I hope
rhyme and a reason. Rhyme and a reason for it, so I understand. But I'm still going to give you crap.
I do hope you had fun those last few years.
No, I was great. And how I ended up staying a little longer, I didn't plan to stay probably 4 or 5 years beyond my original my original date that I planned, but they promoted me. So,
yeah.
And then with our system, it's not really worth your while unless you stay on to do it. But I had an assignment at TRAP, which is an auto theft task force. And it was probably one of the best jobs I've worked in. And I worked with some really great investigators, and it was good. So no, I mean, my barometer was, if I was singing to the radio on the way to work, then it was all good. When the music stopped, then it was time to pull over, leave the county car at Pico Rivera Station, and tell them to come pick it up. But
so when you're cussing on your way to work at the other drivers is when you go, okay, maybe this is getting to me too much.
Exactly.
And I need to go. Yeah.
So
yeah, I kind of felt that way too. And but you know what? I'm happy in retirement, so I think you're going to enjoy it there, Marty. I really do.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. Bought some new clubs, and so I'm expecting a little more time to improve my game.
Okay.
Yeah, going to be in La Mirada at the golf course.
Yeah, Danny's been giving me a hard time because I'm, when we're both retired executives, that the executives spent way too much time on the golf course, and I don't golf. I had to tell him I don't golf, but I do like intellectual pursuits, and this is one of my intellectual pursuits. And I have to give you an invitation to my other show. I think one of the problems nationally that you could probably speak to very intelligently is auto theft. And what cars are getting hit, why they're getting hit, and maybe we can bring you on another show for a short segment. And I usually do that. That's Wednesdays at 2 p.m. our time, but it's a nationally broadcast show. And everywhere where they have these Soros-funded DAs, auto theft is up. I mean, all these other crimes, they're hit and miss because of a lack of reporting. And I explained to people, hey, when I was working, I always looked at auto theft, because auto theft, it doesn't matter where you're poor and you got a 25-year-old car that you're nursing to keep on the road, or if you're selling Bentleys in Beverly Hills. If somebody steals your ride, you want it back, and that gets reported. And that's always a good barometer of what truly is going on in your neighborhood, auto theft. That's how I felt about it. I don't know how you think about that.
Yeah, no, truly a complex issue, just because there's so many ways and the trends continually evolve regarding theft. In the recent past, what's old is new again, and now the Kia Hyundais are being stolen at monumental rates. So, and you have fraud app. They don't necessarily break in, other than the Kias and the Hyundais, and defeat your ignition and go. They're stealing cars from the dealerships. And now they're using technology to steal cars with fobs that were once thought to be impenetrable, but that's not the case. So, it's very interesting. And I would love to come on and talk about it.
Okay, well, I'll look for a date we can bring you on, and it's actually going pretty good. I mean, I'll tell you some of my guests that I have coming up, because it's interesting. So tomorrow I'll be talking about bail reform. So I have somebody who's on the board of the Professional Bail Bondsmen of Texas. So and they did, because it's in their best interest, they did a study to see if all this bail reform stuff actually works. And then actually Todd Rogers is going to come on. Todd Rogers stepped up to be the lead plaintiff with a bunch of cities suing the county of Los Angeles for the bail reform that they're doing here. So I'll bring him on, and that'll be a good show. And then I have some folks coming on that were in Benghazi, so that's later on down the road. So I got to read their book, and then we'll bring them. We'll talk about Benghazi, what went on with God. You saw the movie 13 Hours. Yeah, it was very intense movie. And then I got somebody who's a sheriff on the border who's just recently retired. He's going to come on. So I have a lot of interesting folks coming on, and I am actually enjoying it. It's been a For me, I like the intellectual pursuits versus trying to hit that little ball and to get it into a stupid hole, 500 yards away, So
Well,
I
you have
can't do
plenty of
that.
material.
What was that?
You have plenty of material to keep you occupied with what's
Yeah,
going on.
and it allows me for my political outlets. So hey, so this show we go over crime related movies and we talk about what's in the movie and then we talk about our own experiences. Then we can talk about what's going on today. I used to get a lot more political on these shows, but now I got my other outlets, so I'm less political on this show. But I do get into the politics of this stuff, and I was excited to have you guys on because you guys have both worked narcotics, right?
Yes.
I did not. I saw that as being dirty, not fun, and I didn't want to do that. Of course, you guys probably had a lot of fun doing it, but it seemed like it was this huge commitment that you had to make when you were working something like narcotics. I kind of equated it to being like working the SWAT team, right? You're just all in, right? And that's just the way those at least that's what I thought at the time. But this movie, I looked for a movie where people worked undercover and had to deal with the challenges of undercover. And so before we get in the movie though, Texas in 1970, working. This is Tyler, Texas, in the movie, but it is based upon a real story. So the person who wrote the book, and do we have the copy of the book, Martine? The title up there, I think it's the book's title is named Rush, and it's by Kim. There we go. There it is, Kim Wozencraft. And she was one of the detectives that is kind of pictured in this movie. The movie is fictional, but it is based upon her personal experience. And she was taken right out of the academy to work narcotics, which we do. So the very first thing I want to ask about. So you guys work narcotics in the county of Los Angeles with 10 million people. They're working narcotics in a city with 50 million or 50,000 people where everybody kind of knows everybody. That makes it really challenging to work undercover, don't you think? How about Danny? What do you think?
It's kind of weird because most of the people that work narcotics, when they start off, would go to a station crew. So you're assigned to a station like Pico Rivera or Los Hills. You might have 5 or 6 guys on the crew, and so they're working that specific area. So if you're in Carson, you had 4 guys and a sergeant, and they took care of the city of Carson and the surrounding unincorporated areas. So it would be about the same, small town type of deal, 100,000 people community. But then on the other end, as they get more experience in narcotics, they can move up to different crews, including majors, which is, I don't even know what those guys do, but they do some fantastic stuff. I know that. But they're all not only just all over the county, they're all over the state and the country. I've known a couple of friends that work majors and they'd spent time down in Colombia, in Cuba, and back in Washington, D.C. So they're all over the place.
But if you're doing street level stuff, Marty, if you're doing street level stuff and you're doing buys, people get to know you and they know where you live at if you live in a town with just 50,000 folks, right? Because you're deep undercover. You're not like going to the station every day because they're going to see who goes to the police station every day. I mean, it's a different kind of undercover.
Yeah.
That would be my sense. What do you think?
No, it's absolutely different. So I worked the street task force for about a year, and it was strictly undercover and making street level buys of narcotics, and in some cases selling counterfeit or macadamia nuts as narcotics. This is during the crack era, the rock era. So we would sell macadamia nuts in place of rock cocaine, and we were pretty successful at that until they tested it, and then they got angry and would come back a lot of times. But to the point of the movie, what's similar is Danny's neck of the woods is the Antelope Valley. That's kind of similar to this Catterley, Texas area, because it's although it's more expansive probably than this, but it's about the same population, and it's really a small town, as Danny can probably attest to. The whole valley is kind of a small town. I worked several cases. I worked homicide for 17 years, and I had the same people on multiple cases up there. So what we would do, and I actually, one of my best friends was taken out of the academy and placed as a narcotics officer, an undercover narcotics officer, and probably became a preeminent narc in the area, if not regionally. So they would send people like that into the area, give them money, get them, get to know people, learn who the wheelers and dealers are, who the players are, and then just start buying, and then and then it would culminate in a large mass arrest. Very similar to the movie. It goes along the lines, and there's some realism to the movie, but there's also a lot of dramatic license, and so like I said, however, I think Danny, we have a mutual acquaintance that went astray, I guess you might say, typical similar to this situation. So
Yeah, that was a very sad. We were in the same academy class.
yeah, we're talking about our East LA partner.
Yep. Yeah. You brought up when I was assigned to narcotics, or I went on loan to narco for a year. I was assigned to Antelope Valley Station, working out of the city of Lancaster, assigned to the Lancaster narco crew, and I lived in Lancaster. And it was kind of fun because we'd go out to certain areas, and the only thing I could never buy was methamphetamine. And I looked like a tweaker at the time. I was like 170 pounds, sucked up maybe 150 pounds. I asked my wife, and I couldn't buy meth, but I'd go down into Palmdale to buy heroin for the Palmdale crew, and we'd be doing deals in Lancaster all the time for weed and rock cocaine or crack cocaine, and these guys knew my undercover car, and I'd drive up and they'd still sell me dope.
Yeah.
It's like they're stupid.
Yeah.
What were they using to? I mean, was that part of it? They were using their product as well. I mean,
what I found with the guy selling the crack, the main dealers, they weren't using what they sold. They'd smoke weed. That was about it. But if they were selling rocks of crack or heroin, they weren't using it.
Okay. Well, Martine, go ahead and roll the first clip, and then we'll get into the type of, if you guys, this is historical, maybe you know or maybe you don't know, but before the crack epidemic, I remember meth was big in West Hollywood. The bikers were involved in that, and they kind of showed that in the movie here, and heroin was available. Mexican brown was the only thing I came across when I was working the streets, and powder cocaine. So in the mid 80s, it was more powder than crack, and that came on in the late 80s and early 90s. Am I accurate on that, Marty, or was there something different going on?
It's kind of in LA County, it was like regional. So I worked patrol in Linwood, South Los Angeles area, and then transferred to East LA. And so in South Los Angeles County, I was dealing with rock or crack cocaine. Then I transferred it over to East LA Patrol, demographically, large Hispanic population, and I was dealing with powder cocaine. As far as heroin, it was tar heroin. And then on some West Side deals and so forth, it was brown powder heroin as well. So, I mean, it in LA County, it's kind of, it goes regionally, as far as the drugs of choice. As far as PCP in South Los Angeles, they were using Sherman cigarettes, brown long cigarettes. I went to East LA and they were using Kool, the brand Kool cigarettes, KOOL, super Kools. So, it's kind of, it's interesting. And that's just right up and down the 710 freeway.
Yep. A couple of miles apart. Yeah. Double dip super Kools.
Yep.
That's a cigarette dipped in PCP, right?
Yeah, it's
That's
a
exactly
cool
right.
menthol cigarette dipped in
PCP. We have to translate for our audience, guys, because
Yeah.
they're all newbies. They don't know. But hey, Slasher Fred, yes, there was some great songs in this movie. This this Texas in Heaven, yes. Now that one of the actors in this is Greg Allman. I don't know if you guys noticed him. Now my
Yeah, he was the
sister,
main dealer. That was
right?
Gaines.
My sister had his album, and it had "Ramblin' Man" on it. Lord, I was born a rambling man, trying to do the. Yeah, I love that song, right? And of course, I notice how they limit his spots as an actor because he really wasn't the best acting on this in this show. But and of course he's got a Mercedes in Texas, which at the time in the 70s, I don't know if that would have flied. But he's the main dealer. He owns the bars. Now so I have a question for you guys. Bars now for in West Hollywood, if there were bars dealing dope and we figured it out, they got a cafe incident card, and they could lose their license. So how often did you guys actually, we'll start with Danny, buy in a bar or a club where they also had a liquor license?
I never bought in a bar. I have had informants that would buy in
Okay.
bars, but I don't think we ever dropped a cafe incident card on them.
Well, you never did, really, because if you get them. Now, what about you, Marty? What do you think? Did you ever buy in a club itself?
So we would, when a community issue would arise, and selling out of bars is one of the issues. So they'd send us to specific areas. So in East LA, I made several buys in Latin bars, but went to West Hollywood, and because of the makeup there, it was much more difficult. It was very hard for me to buy narcotics in the bars in West Hollywood, and then, but I do know my friend, a mutual friend, I guess, Tony Shapiro. He could buy dope in San Quentin prison yard, and he was able to purchase narcotics in West Hollywood bars, and sometimes from even celebrities. So so
Tony could buy. He'd buy anything anywhere.
Yeah,
he was really good.
Yeah,
there's another.
I couldn't buy
there.
aspirin in a pharmacy, but he could buy.
Well, I gotta clarify, and I know some folks, if they've watched me before, know West Hollywood. They have kind of Boys Town. That's where the boys go and meet each other and make the love connection. So it's primarily a gay strip. They might have some bisexual clubs and transgender folks there too. And then you got the Sunset Strip, which is the rock and rollers, and they're kind of clannish too, right? If you don't look like a rock and roller, you're probably not going to get an invitation to buy anything, right? And the clubs, they get to know who comes and goes, who the regular customers are. It doesn't matter whether you're on the Sunset Strip or if you're on Boys Town, right? So that's what you're talking about, right, Marty?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's kind of incestual in there. You got to know who's going. But as you said accurately, on the Strip it was a little different. Places like the Rainbow Room and so forth. They would. You just had to work a little harder, so to speak. And if it's all about communication, if you could talk your way into it, you could get it. So.
Yeah, so just for clarity, for my audience here, so the Rainbow Room, the Roxy, the Whiskey A Go Go, at the time, Gazzari still probably existed. These were all the clubs that a lot of mainstream acts would play occasionally, or at least started out there, and then they would go on to bigger stuff. And if you were upcoming, because we had, at the time when I was working there, we had Poison was there a lot, and I wasn't really into the heavy metal stuff, but oh my God, Eddie Van Halen. The Van Halen would be there occasionally, but who's the other one? It's Axl Rose. It's right. I forget the name of their band. So Axl Rose and Slash, whoever, the Guns N' Roses. I'm sorry, that's what they were. And so they would be around, and you have all these people with big hair running around, and there was a lot of coke flowing on.
Yeah.
On the Sunset Strip, you could make half a dozen coke arrests a night just working patrol.
Yeah. In the gay community, methamphetamine was a drug of choice there, and along with other stimulants. But methamphetamine, that kind of preceded the explosion that we've encountered nowadays.
Yeah, it was meth was always big in West Hollywood, and even after crack hit, it still meth was the go-to for the boys, the gay community there. Which I always thought was, man, you guys are shooting this stuff up. You had age running around, they're shooting this stuff up, and it was crazy. Let's get on to our second clip, and this is out of the academy. And what I liked about this movie, and I had hoped to get Tony on, but he was busy. So Marty, you're filling in for Tony here.
Wow, those are big shoes. Well, no, they're not. They're little shoes. But
well, you are taller than him, right? So yeah. But so what I liked about the show is they realized they have to get a fresh face, somebody that can buy and fit in. They look for a young female to do that. And they're at the academy now. I love the actor here, Sam Elliott. You know, he's in a lot of great movies. He's looking at the guys. Hey, he'd be a good partner for you. He'll watch your back. He's this and all this stuff. But he's Jason Patrick here is looking at the girl, probably for more than just buying dope, right? So, but taken out of the academy, that's always a challenge. Marty, you kind of want to go through why would we take somebody out of the academy if you can give away those trade secrets?
Well, how we operated was we have taken people out of the academy. Specifically, Tony, he just graduated the academy and then was taken out. But he was taken out more for his fresh face and to place into schools at the time because there was a large problem with drugs being sold in schools. And because Tony still looks like he's 12 years old, he was taken from the jail or custody setting and placed in the high schools. What we were doing throughout, up until about the 2000s, we were taking newly graduated people that were working custody and bringing them out. And we've taken them out in teams, and male and female, and females inherently are more successful just because it's a male-dominated field, drug dealing, so to speak. And if you have an attractive female, it's the easiest thing in the world to buy drugs from horny drug dealers. So that's how as a sheriff's department, that's how we operated. So.
Okay, let's see. We got a question here. Chief Jordan, a gentleman, and let's see. Did I hear you mention that Nat Sherman and the Super Cools, they were still around? Had a cousin taken out at the academy and put in schools. Oh, this guy had a cousin taken out of the academy, put in schools. Well, one of the things I did talk to Tony about is they also, I went to the academy with Tony and nobody invited me to come and go work the schools. Maybe I looked older than my age, probably, being 180 pounds and being able to bench press 300 pounds was at the time was probably one of the, I was a little too big for that role. Right. So, but Tony told me, he said, one of the things is they didn't want the guy that had the military or cop bearing. Right. And that made sense to me. What do you think, Marty? Does that play in? You don't want them to get too deep in the police culture before they develop the nomenclature or the language or the bearing that some guys might have?
That's absolutely true. I mean, once you can never take somebody out of patrol because they're already jaded. I mean, and you got to get them early in custody. And it's all about mentality as well. I mean, Tony had the mentality of a 15-year-old and probably still does. And that certainly helps if you get sent into a high school. So,
all right, I'm gonna have to cut this clip and send that one to Tony.
So, but it's all about mentality as well as appearance, I mean, and the bottom line is it's, as I said earlier, it's communication. If you can talk, then you can buy drugs. So.
My wife told me, she goes, "Oh, you always talked higher than everybody else. You were always very and I told her, no, I had a C+ grade point average. I didn't study. I just sounded smart, so, all right. Well, I did learn later on in life that I was actually pretty smart. I just didn't apply myself because that's school, right? So I got, one of the interesting things that they show in the movie, and we can show this clip, is needle. I listed it as needle. And this is, so Jason Patrick here is showing her how to shoot up, and he's allegedly using cut material to show her how to. And so did you have to have these classes, right, you guys? So did you get shown how to do it, how to roll a joint, how to shoot up if you had to? Danny Coon, did that get shown to you, or is that assumed that you know that coming off?
I went to public schools.
Oh, okay, that cut it. Okay, I went to Catholic. I didn't know any of that, but I went to a blue collar Catholic school, so we didn't.
You know,
have
as far
the
as
wealthy ones had that stuff.
As far as watching someone shoot up or something like that, I don't think so. Anything we saw was explained to us or done by movies, by real hypes and stuff like that. The interesting thing in this movie is Patrick, he actually did shoot up. He was using a synthetic, probably a vitamin or something. So he actually did stick a needle in his arm and do the whole thing, which was kind of bizarre to watch.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, as far as anything else, no, just I learned from the streets on how to do a lot of that stuff and how the guys do it. Other than watching a video on watching someone load up a needle for heroin or something. But
Marty, same to you. Did you ever, I don't want to say try it, but did you ever go through the motions of filling a needle and preparing for the shoot? And did you carry a rig when you were buying, like we later see in this?
No, not really. I mean, okay. So, we received training. Everybody goes to a basic narcotics school and then an advanced narcotics school. And there's a lot of, demonstrations and so forth, simulations and so forth. But as far as the advice given to use undercover, you should never use anything. And you never know what you're getting, so you should never put anything in. So, but I mean, there's always urban legends from narcs that how they simulated. And I remember hearing the stories from older narcs. I never saw this, but I mean, hearing the stories that packing your nose with Vaseline so that you could simulate, snorting the substance, usually cocaine. And then there's no simulation for geezing or using a rig, but that's when it comes in, and when you can be evasive, and explain your way out of it. One of the most realistic scenes was that I noted was with the African American drug dealer and Jason Patrick and Jennifer Jason Lee in there when he forced Jason Patrick to use their and that whole scene was one of the more realistic scenes in there, because the way they demonstrated using it and the whole term, that jacking off and stuff, because that's what the hypes or the heroin addicts would do with the syringes. It's in your vein, and you kind of manipulate it, and then one of the best education sources for Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department members, and maybe Danny can attest to this, is talking to inmates. We have the opportunity to work with the largest population of drug addicts in Los Angeles County on a daily basis. And everyone I encountered was willing to talk to you, tell you, and I received my best education in law enforcement the year I spent in custody, talking to people about various criminal enterprises, including narcotics. So
that is true. If anybody who ever worked the jail didn't take advantage of that educational process, they were foolish, because these guys would sit there and tell you stuff. It's just, you're seeing a guy going through withdrawals, and he'd explain the entire process to you. And so later on in life, in your patrol life, you're using the experiences from there to deal with the situation you have in patrol.
Well, so when I was looking at this, so this is the 70s, and of course, Nixon was the one, I think he lost the war on drugs. So we started taking the sale of drugs, the use of drugs, much more serious. And what I saw in this was, I don't want to say amateurish, but in the way we do things today, this was amateurish, right? It was, we hadn't developed systems and strategies to help protect the officers when they work in this environment. And, I one of the things I always think of, and I know I mentioned to one of you, is the death of the LAPD officer, Jack Blackie Sawyer, where he went into a place to buy some, he had like 140,000 to buy some, I think it was Coke. I can't remember what the dope was, but he took the money with him in the hotel room, and it was actually a straight ripoff, and he was killed. And of course, I imagine we learned from that, and we do it differently. If he's going to buy, you never have the money with you when you're negotiating, right? And so it was loose in the 70s and early 80s, right? So Marty, I'll throw this one at you. We tightened up our strategies, how our undercovers worked, how we did buys, you name it. We looked at each failure we looked at and we corrected, right? And I was seeing a lot of failures in this movie, and I knew that this was just the budding. We're just starting this war on drugs. What do you think of that comment? And how would you, if you agree with it, how would you add to that?
Well, in law enforcement, if you're not evolving, then you're dead, because constantly, we're, like you said, we're not the smartest people in the world, and so we make a lot of mistakes. But what we're good at is learning from those mistakes. And so we start out on the fly, like everything. And this is the 70s, as you said. The war on drugs, quote unquote, was just beginning. So, there was no template for what to do, where prior to this. So in the movie's case, so, you had an experienced narc. He's got to take a new narc under his wing. And then you have a overzealous chief of police or administrator that wants results. And so, but there's no template for that, so they're winging it. And much like a lot of instances on our department, or my former department, I guess, the sheriff's department, things went awry. And then we took corrective measures to kind of bring them back. So yeah, I mean, it's like everything else. But before my era, but right before my era, search warrant, there was no ops plans. There was just no operational plans. No discussing it. It's, hey, I gotta buy into a guy down the street. He's selling heroin. Let's go. 4 guys saddle up, put a vest on. One grabs a shotgun, one grabs a ram, and you're off in one car, and you're kicking in a door, and run into the bathroom to get to the toilet before he does, and collecting the thing. And 90% of the cases, they all come back. But unfortunately, and I happen to know a good friend of mine who was killed in a raid. It doesn't always go well. So.
Yeah, and just to clarify what Marty's talking about here is, I think one of those shootings actually caused us to do the risk assessment on each warrant, and the lieutenant had to do the checkoff list, because I was a DB lieutenant for a while, and you have to walk through it, and if it fit the criteria, then you didn't serve it. It went to the SWAT team to serve, or if the other thing we did is we raised the skill set of the narcs. If something's right on the border, whether SWAT should handle it or not, that you guys were still allowed to do it. We just made sure you had the training. I don't want to say we, or our department did, right? So that we did raise your skill set, but then when it got to a certain point, we brought in the gunslingers, right? The real gunslingers.
Well, no narc worth his salt would want an SCB or a special enforcement or a SWAT operator to serve a warrant for him regarding narcotics, because of the difference in tactics, so to speak. You're less likely to find a product if somebody else, a SWAT operator, is serving your warrant. I mean, it's not the safest, but when you served a warrant, you usually knew where, or hopefully you had intelligence where it might be, and you certainly knew where it was heading. So,
Yeah.
if you could use diversions in the bathroom, we banged out windows and stuff to keep them from heading to the toilet. But a SWAT operator isn't going to operate like that. So.
Well, I do know that I had a tactical team that I put together, and they were training with the narco guys. So they did raise the skill set of the narco guys, so that, because you're right. SWAT guys are going to be focused on how they do an entry, and you guys are going to be focused on doing the entry and preserving evidence. Is really what you're talking about.
Correct.
Yeah, it's SEB, or SWAT team. They actually, in the 90s, they had what they called the tactical narcotic team, or entries. And they were loosely based on what we did working narco. They were a little bit slower going through the house, because doing a narco search warrant is 30 seconds of fear, of terror, until everybody's either handcuffed or set down and everything like that. But the wild part was going from doing narco search warrants and then eventually getting into DB and doing detective search warrants and entries. Totally different. Because when I was at Compton, we'd be doing search warrants. Just about every warrant we did was a call out. So you're standing outside telling people to come out, and then you clear the house. Well, that's counterintuitive what narco is. Okay.
Yeah, and that's when we had the Breonna Taylor shooting. I think that was a dope thing, and that I guess I wanted to get into your guys' first buy, but let's talk about this first. So there's a move afoot to get rid of the early morning search, so you can do a search warrant and hit it before 6 a.m. if you can show justification, and you can do a search warrant without the knock and notice if you can show the justification. And there's a move afoot on the left to end that, to get rid of that stuff, saying that it's inherently dangerous. I'll throw this one to you, Marty. Why is it important for a narcotics crew to have those tools available to them if they're doing a search warrant for narcotics?
So much of what is being proposed by the left, I guess, quote unquote, we've been operating under these restrictions here in California for many, many years. So other parts of the country, obviously, regionally, they operate under different rules. So it's very difficult to obtain a no-knock search warrant. I mean, you'd have to have some compelling evidence to influence a magistrate that you don't need to knock and notice. And then early morning search warrants. When I worked the gang unit, OSS, I mean, that's every one of our warrants was that, and it's based on the potential for violence. And a lot of times, even more so than the violence, is we wanted to do warrants before schools were in session. So you want to do them at 6 o'clock before kids start walking and stuff. And so the proximity to a residence or location near a school was always a factor as well. And so judges would read your warrant, and most times, if there's probable cause to convince the judge then it was granted. So here in California, we, as far as law enforcement, there's a lot of bad stuff that occurs in the state socially, but as far as law enforcement, we're always looking ahead, and maybe because we've had some really tragic things occur, but we've tried to learn from them and improve. So as I said, if you're not evolving, it's like a shark. If you're not moving, then you're dead. So you got to keep moving.
I'll throw that question to you, Danny. Same thing.
Yeah, same thing. The propensity for violence when people are awake is obviously greater. A good example would be at the top of City Terrace. As if you continue and one way goes to the Sherman Block building, the other way goes towards Civil Brand. There's a house, it's the Romo House. Marty and I are very familiar with it. At the bottom of City Terrace, about a quarter mile away, is an elementary school. And anytime there is a warrant on City Terrace, especially at the Romo House, which was probably every 6 months, it was either a SWAT team entry, and it was definitely like 4 o'clock in the morning, night service,
Yeah.
because of the propensity of the violence.
Now, over time, did it get harder to get the nighttime service and the no knock? I mean, so you guys
No.
started in the 80s. Did it get much harder to get that stuff, Marty, as you
No.
continued?
No, because the threat remains the same. So, like as I said, I have maybe seen less fingers on my hand how many times a no-knock warrant was authorized. So no-knock warrants are, and I've been involved in thousands of search warrants over my career, and for various degrees and for various seeking various evidence. So the no-knock warrant is, I mean, you'd have to have some compelling reasons to, as far as propensity towards violence, weapons. Your intelligence is that, like, this guy has made statements, or this gal has made statements that they're not going to go quietly, and so forth. So yeah, it's pretty hard, and as it should be, really, because I mean, we should, every warrant or every intrusion that we make should be within the parameters of the Constitution of the United States. So
I would assume that most people don't want to shoot it out with the police, dope dealers, and then really they're basically armed for people that are going to rip them off, thieves.
well,
right?
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, Pat, because I mean, I think Danny and I can both speak to, we've lost good friends
Yes.
through doing entries. I mean, going through the door of somebody's house is inherently probably the most dangerous thing we do as law enforcement officers, and going to, as Danny's point, about when people are asleep, it's a little better. The Jack Williams case illustrates that. It was recently in the news. For those of your viewers that aren't aware, it was a narcotics warrant in the La Puente area, and it was served. So this is the early 80s, late 70s, and so, like, once again, we're working off the fly. It was kind of one of those things that, hey, let's go hit this house. The guy, we got a warrant, let's go. Well, it's the middle of the day or middle of the morning, and the target of the warrant was out watering his grass. Saw the police coming up, in their quote unquote unmarked vehicles, and went in, armed himself, and shot one of the deputies making entry, Jack Williams, and his partner was left inside the house with him. So yeah, I mean, that just illustrates, that it's safer to do it while they're asleep and not aware. So
yeah, I did profile that case on both of my shows, because the DA, Gascon, who were trying to get out, attempted to pull a fast one and suggest there was something wrong with that conviction. So he wasn't going to defend a habeas corpus at the state Supreme Court level with this killer who'd been in jail for like 40 years. But that's, they operate in the gray area over there in the DA's office to hit their ideological goals. So the Public Defenders Union put that out, and I profiled it on both of my shows, and hopefully I helped a little bit. But let's get into your first spy. So let's roll that clip there. And so, Danny, your first spy, you're doing your first spy. You're the newbie. They've trained you. Tell me, how were you feeling?
Nervous.
Nervous.
Very, very nervous. And mine was, I was just buying off a street dealer. I rolled up in my car. I was assigned like this was 92. It would be about an 86, 87 Chevy Camaro, which was a, what do they call that when we steal people's property?
Yeah.
It was, anyway, that's what I was assigned. And it was me and another guy. And I just rolled up on this one where the street dealers are all hanging out on the street, went in and bought a rock for $20.
Bought a rock for $20. Now,
but that evolved into a
Go
couple
ahead.
of weeks later, I had an intro in with the guy, and this I was doing about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. And, then you didn't carry any ID and nothing, no driver's license. No, I didn't even carry a wallet. And I'm in this apartment, and I'm setting up a deal to buy $5,000 worth of weed. And I'm sitting in there, and on the table, right in front of the guy we're talking to, is a MAC-10. And like the crew told me, since there's no communication, the crew leader said, "You're going to be in there 10 minutes. If you're not out, we're coming in." Well, I was in there about 15, 20 minutes, and they never did come in. And we did end up setting up to buy, and I did end up buying a bunch of weed, but it was interesting. Another time I got introduced into a heroin group, and these guys were based up out of Rosamond, which is 15, 20 miles north of Lancaster in Kern County. And I'm in the same car, and I have a Beretta that's registered to the County of Los Angeles. I have a radio that's a Sheriff's Department radio. I had probably $100 worth of heroin, and I'm driving back from Rosamond on the 14 freeway. And unbeknownst to me, I was doing like about 85, 90 miles an hour. And it dawned on me just as I'm coming into LA County that, dude, you're an idiot, because this is the same piece of highway with the people that pulled over Rodney King, the husband-wife team. They patrol that same area at the same shift at that time. They're not really going to believe that this guy who looks like a tweaker is a Los Angeles County deputy sheriff. Because again, I had no ID, no nothing. They're going to, the car comes back, no registration on file, everything. So it was, those moments are scary.
You did how many buys for your year in narcotics? Dozens, I imagine, at least.
Oh, at least 2 a month.
At least 2 a month.
Yeah.
But do you remember the details of that first one, because it was the first one?
Yeah, it was just really, I just pulled up in a car and, kind of signaled to the guy. He rolled over. I flipped him a 20. He went back out of view, and then came back out and gave me the product. And after I did that, it was kind of interesting is we would make the buys, and at the time, the Lancaster and Palmdale, they both had a gang team, and I'd came from gangs into narco, so I knew how it worked. Is they had a gang team, and so you'd let the gang guys know, hey, I just bought some dope from so and so. Can you ID them for me? And they'd swoop in, and the gang guys, the drug dealers knew that the gang guys weren't going to mess with them because they weren't gang banging. So they'd go in, they'd take a picture of them and FI them, and then we'd get a warrant off them that way. But it was kind of funny, because when I work gangs, and like it goes back to stupidity again. I work gangs and then go to narcotics and Lancaster gangs, and I'm jamming up the same guys when I was working gangs as when I was buying from when I was working dope. The only difference was is I had a goatee and longer hair, and not.
It's so interesting. They don't see you in uniform, so they don't see you as that guy anymore. What about you, Marty? Your first buy?
Well, my first buy, I broke the golden rule. It occurred down at an area that Danny's probably familiar with, Laverne and Whittier.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was buying a bag of weed, and I jumped in the car with the guy. Well, actually, no, it was my undercover vehicle, my unmarked vehicle. I let him get in the car with me so we could go and make the deal. I guess I was overzealous and wanted to consummate the deal, and that's a no-no. As I was inexperienced, and so obviously with experience, I learned that, man, you don't do stuff like that. And then and then made several buys after that in different areas. But I remember another kind of, it caused a rule change on the sheriff's department. I went and bought some cocaine in the Linwood area. That was with the street task force, and drove away, told them the deal was consummated, but then drove back to be part of the arrest team. And I didn't have a rage. I just had my badge showing, and I get out, and I go directly to who sold me that, and he starts reaching for his waist and backing up, and all appearances were that he was going to draw a weapon. So in order to counteract that, I hit him over the head with my gun, and it wasn't a weapon, and that's kind of why I held shooting him. I probably could have, but I held off shooting at him, and it was a whole stack of dope that he was reaching for. But like I said, so that was at the time, a head strike was akin to shooting somebody with the force elevation scale. So the alphabet police came out, and this was scrutinized up and down and everything, and it was found to be justified or reasonable, but the policy changed that an undercover operator can't get involved in the arrest, and two, everybody affecting the arrest has to wear a raid jacket or identifying vest and so forth. So I was kind of, I made some new policy, I guess, because
Now, was that pre-Beretta days?
No, it was after Beretta.
I'm surprised the gun did your Beretta didn't go to a million pieces.
Well, no, see, back on the street task force, I was just carrying a 2-inch.
Okay.
So it was a sturdy.
You shouldn't, with a 2-inch, you shouldn't have even been there anyways. Gosh,
Well, like I said,
a little overzealous. So in this show, in the movie though, she makes her first bar. They meet the guy in the bar, and then they go to a house to make the purchase, which to me was really unusual.
Yeah.
But we are at the halfway mark, guys. So stick around. I think Martine has a commercial for us to show. A commercial to show, and we'll be back on Morning Coffee with the Chief in just a minute.
Meet the Seattle Vigilante. Like so many comic heroes, this warrior hides his identity. But his identity isn't the only secret he has to keep. After grievous wounds received during combat, Tier 1 operator John Russell begins to recover and comes to terms with his new reality of being an amputee. And as he learns how to use his new prosthetic limb, he finds himself caught up in the bureaucratic red tape that too many wounded veterans experience, the exhausting medboard process. Out of sheer frustration, John takes it out on the criminal scum of the city. But when reality kicks in, John realizes he started something that's having an impact on the greater world around him, and thus has to reevaluate his motives. And moreover, just how far is John willing to go to finish this war he's declared against the criminals in Seattle? And will he even survive? From the creator of IDW's award-winning graphic novel Code Word Geronimo comes a new story about a different kind of warrior, Vindicated Inc., the first of its kind disabled veteran action hero comic. The Vindicated Inc. graphic novel crowdfunding campaign on fundmycomic.com is provided in the description of this video. We hope you become a contributor. Please share this link. Thank you.
There's only one location on the internet where you can get it all: movie, TV, and comic industry. News and rumor analysis, official scoops from Geekosity magazine, reviews, and interviews. So, when you need it to be Sunday, there's only one place to go, mate. Pop Culture Minefield. Well, they're always talking nerdy nerd stuff. Right, jog on then.
Welcome back to Morning Coffee with the Chief. We're going over the 1991 movie Rush, all about narcotics in Texas in the 1970s. Hey, so I didn't do these scenes, but I really want to address them. One of them is, we already talked about it, and that is Willie Red, where he made them use heroin to show that they weren't cops, I guess. And that does happen, right? And I'll get those comments from you in a minute here. But also the chief spoke about how they found the syringe in the schoolyard. And so, Marty, talk about the politics of the narco war. We were under pressure to do something about it. in the 80s and 90s, right? I mean, guys were expected to get dope, you guys are expected to get money, and you guys are expected to make headlines in narcotics, right?
Yes, and just the infusion of dope in this region was just crazy. I mean, abandoned houses stacked with cocaine, especially around Glendale area and so forth, and everybody was in a race to recover narcotics and confiscate money for improving their police, their tactics and their logistics and so forth, and just and paying overtime. So all these agencies were competing against each other, and I think to some extent that's what was the downfall of a group of individuals that Danny had mentioned, the Arco Narco, crew that went astray, I guess, so to speak, and stuff. I mean, and it all starts innocently enough, or not innocently enough, but I guess justifying it. If my knowledge on the episode is that it all stems from lack of equipment, and so hey, we're gonna take money to outfit us a little better, a little safer, and so forth, and then that's the poison fruit that starts it, and then it evolves. So yeah, but you're under a lot of pressure, and like in the movie, this chief, for more religious reasons and more conservative values, but was willing to go to any extremes to kind of impact the problem in his city. So just, but you have to temper everything. Everything has to be tempered, and you have to. A lot of times, it's best to bring in outside eyes to provide some oversight.
Well, it's interesting. So the guy they go after, and it's played by Greg Almond, is he's into pornography, and he's into other things that aren't dope. And the chief wants to take him down, and he sees dope as the tool for taking him down. But that's why I asked the questions about, did you buy in bars and restaurants? Because you might make some money on dope, selling some dope out of your club, but you make way more money on alcohol and food, and that's why most of the bars and stuff, that they don't really want it in their clubs. They don't really want it, or they don't want it connected with their employees. They might let other people sell, but they want to have some plausible deniability on that stuff going on in their clubs. But Danny, I wanted to hit you up on so what we see is as we talked about Arco Narco, that it's a different culture, and it can be sex, drugs, and rock and roll is the way I talked about it in West Hollywood, because we had some guys that they got allured into the lifestyle, and they ended up leaving the sheriff's department because of they were using, or what was it, women, alcohol, and drugs, I guess, for West Hollywood is what it was. And but it's when you're somebody who's never experienced any of that, and then suddenly you're on the sheriff's department, and it's right there, all of it.
Well, I look at it in the New York Police Department. They hire one time a year. They have one academy class. They'll hire a couple of thousand people at one shot. Well, in the 80s, we hired I can't think of how many people. It was just from about 78 to 82 was a mass hiring to build up for the Olympics, and so we weren't really getting the cream of the crop. And so a lot of these guys, they didn't have the same integrity that, I would say less than 0.5% of cops are dirty. Probably even less than that, probably 0.00005 are dirty. But when you're hiring a whole bunch of it at one time, it's difficult. Plus now in the 80s, it was all about gangs and dope. And that's, we didn't have the best equipment. I worked East LA with guys on graveyard shift that, these old heads, they were hired in the 60s and 70s. They didn't wear vests. Yeah. It was unheard of. These guys, I mean, what are you, crazy or something like that? And that eventually evolved in, almost you have to wear a vest. in the later 80s and 90s. But the equipment that we had back then, the name of the SEB sergeant that was killed doing an entry, his name escapes me, but he was wearing a vest that was
Is it
surplus.
Laurel Smith?
Laurel Smith.
Yeah,
Laurel
Laurel
Smith.
Case. Yeah, he was wearing a vest that was surplus army from Vietnam. And the bullet that hit him actually went through some whatever grooves in the vest and everything, and that's what killed him.
I didn't know
And
that.
so we didn't have that good of equipment, and until now you're getting up into our cars were junk. We had 38s. The bad guys had the gangs who ran the drugs. They all had AK-47s and other type of really cool weapons, MAC-10s and all that, and they weren't afraid to use them. Thank God they're like the Somalis; they can't hit anything they shoot at. But I have friends that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. They say the same thing about the.
Well, I think so. I gotta clarify the audience, and we're gonna roll on another clip here. But when we seize money, what is it, Marty? What's the term we use when we take the money? It's we have to go through a legal process, but that's what
the forfeiture process.
Forfeiture process. That's it. And that's what we're talking about. As soon as the money start rolling in, executives, senior executives start thinking, "Wow, this is great." We have because as being a chief, what I realize, what you learn when it comes to budget. Well, you know this, Marty, too, is a very small amount of your budget is actually flexible. You can use it for different things. Everything is pretty much tied into salaries and benefits and equipment. There is really not a lot of maneuvering room with your budget. And so when you got several million coming in from forfeiture seizures, and it has to be used for law enforcement, that is very enticing for executives. But it also, as you talked about, creates an environment where you're chasing the money instead of solving the problem, is, I guess, the way I would say it. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but that's how I saw it.
I totally agree with that. And as you said, about managing the budget accounts for many things in the operation, but it doesn't account for improving safety and so forth, and equipment, upgrading equipment and stuff. It's just when they come to a budget, submit a budget, they just account for what will make the wheels roll, not for what for how the wheels look. So
yeah, let's roll the next clip, and this is a dangerous game. And I thought the fact that these guys are undercover and they actually are living in a house and everybody knows who they are as dope dealers or dope users and dealers, I guess. But they actually come to their house where they're living at to do this deal. Now this is where, okay, was this true? Did this really happen? I don't know if this happened, if this is just exaggerated, but if it did happen, this is some dangerous stuff where they actually know where you live and where you're at 24/7, and they show up. In fact, I entitled this clip "A Dangerous Game," right? And plus, it's bikers who, that's what they imply in here, that are dealing meth, and they're not exactly a go along, get along kind of crew if they feel that you're cops. You want to address that one, Marty?
yeah, and this came to light closer to the end of the movie when Jason Patrick was ultimately killed, and Jennifer Jason Leigh was threatened with the shotgun. So yeah, it's I would tend to think even back in this day and age, this was more of a Hollywood. I'd like to think this was literary license on this, just to make the movie a little more palatable. But yeah, that's something you don't want to do. You don't want to bring them into your home. That's kind of Narco 101 is you want a place where you have the advantage, and certainly in your own abode is a disadvantage. So,
and how about pressing to buy more than you're ready to buy? Have you ever been that? Yeah. Well, I got this. This is because that was part of the scene. He says, "I only got this amount of money." Well, no, I expect to sell this. You need to get me this. And of course, he's looking at the female cop for you can pay me off in trade, I guess. But did you ever get pressured to do a different deal than you were ready for?
Well, not to that degree, but I tell you what, money is the motivator. I mean, I many times where they were hesitant to sell to me, I would flash the money, and so no matter what the amount of money is, it usually is sufficient in the end. So so if they see the money, then the greed kicks in, and so a scene like that, they went all that way over to the house. They're there. They're in the house. I would say the deal was going to get done. I mean, and not having enough money or whatever that, if you're dealing with dopers, you're going to come across that. I mean, any money is enough money.
Yeah,
Yeah,
money,
and
money.
that's the other thing. I know, and Danny, you can jump in on this. Is they weren't controlling their buys. It was very loose. They were just seen
That
as
was
a couple of users, and they would. I mean, I don't know how much of this is true, but I think, where's their backup team? Where's this? Where's that? This is dangerous stuff. That's why I like a dangerous game. But we, even in the infancies, and I don't want to say we weren't doing narcotics before the 70s, but as it became a greater priority, we always made sure our undercovers were protected with backup.
Right. Even if you had a guy that you arrested and released and he was going to make a controlled buy for you, you always had a team watching him just so to make sure the buy was correctly done, but also to watch out for his own safety, because now he's an agent of you and you have to watch out for him. Two of the things in the movie was, one, going to the house. That's a big time no-no. And the other one is where they did what I call tripping. And tripping, you never trip, which means you never get into your dealer's car and go for a ride with them, because then your surveillance crew, which these guys did not have a surveillance crew, your surveillance crew can't maintain surveillance on you. They don't know where you're going or anything like that. And I've had a couple of cases where these guys wanted to trip, and I'm not getting in your van. We're going to do it. This is what we're going to do. We'll meet someplace. You call me, I'll call you. Page me. Here's my pager number, and we'll meet someplace. And these were more larger money deals. These weren't your street deals.
So that's old school pagers, right?
Yeah, pagers.
Everybody that had a pager was a dope dealer or somebody that had way too many girlfriends, I think, is what I remembered. So on the informant pieces, we kind of get, so originally they're using this guy to help be introduced to the dealers around town. And he says something pretty interesting. He says, hey, you guys don't work, you have money. Who are you guys? And they come clean with them. And one of the things that I saw, and certainly that they let him, he had way more information on them than I would have been comfortable with as a cop, Marty. So when you're working with even a trusted informant, how much do you let them know about you?
Well, it's been I guess I was taught this early on, but very little. I mean, you don't discuss family, how many kids or anything, because there's a reason why this person is an informant. They inform, and they're gonna, eventually they're gonna tell other people. It's gonna get out. I mean, and you just you give the people you work with, as far as suspects and informants, as little information or as little incorrect or correct information as possible. So that you don't want them knowing your history or whatever.
For the most part, yes. On the flip side, when I worked in the city of Avalon on Catalina Island, I would get informants, and they had a big drug problem over there, still do.
Yeah.
And I would get informants from the island that wanted to work off a case or something like that. And they knew everything about me. They knew where I lived. They knew where my wife worked. They knew, knew what beer I drank. They knew everything about me because it was such a small community.
Yeah, when you're on Gilligan's Island, you can't.
All right, you're gonna have to explain that venue there, Danny. So it's an island off the coast of California, and its population is what?
Okay, Catalina Island is a small island, 22 miles off the coast of Los Angeles. It is mostly populated in the city of Avalon, and They claim their population is about 3,500. I would say it's probably closer to 5,000. And then on the west end of the island, there's a small community called Two Harbors. And the population there during the summertime, the working population there during the summertime, probably a couple hundred. But it's a huge vacation destination for boaters and just people want to go over there during the summertime. If the 4th of July falls on a 3-day weekend, it's guesstimated they'll have over 20 to 30,000 people in just the city of Avalon alone, way more than that city can handle. And they contract, city contracts with the sheriff's department. And when I was working there, they had 9 deputies, 3 sergeants, and 1 lieutenant. And so you're always outnumbered.
Well, you weren't working dope there. You were just.
I was a station detective, or I was the detective bureau, I should say.
Yeah.
And
So-
one of the reasons I was picked to be the station detective was because of my prior narco experience. So I knew how to do all of the a lot of it's the administrative stuff that the sergeants would do on a team. I knew all of that, how to do all of that. And I had a handful of informants that I worked over there. These guys would get stupid, get drunk in a bar, and I'd get them to work their case off instead of having to deal with going to AA meetings and dealing with going to court every week. Because the judge over there, he'd make you be in court every week just because. Even if you lived on the mainland and picked up a case on the island, he would have you in court every week just to check, make sure you're doing your probation.
Oh my God!
So it was a lot of fun. But when we had bigger operations, I would get with some. We worked out of all of our dope stuff at the time. Went over to the Lakewood station, and so I made some really good friends over with Lakewood Narco, and they would occasionally get some UCs to come over to the island and do stuff for us.
Yeah, would you coordinate those operations? I went over on at least one, but there's been several where we'd send a bunch of UCs, a few UCs over, and it's just actually, I almost feel guilty about the operation because they give you a lot of money and tell you to go to the bars and get to work.
There's one. He was a sergeant then of one of the crews, and he's a retired chief. Marty knows him, John.
Yeah.
Retired from emergency operations.
Uh-huh.
He brings a team over, and a lot of times to get people, anybody from any law enforcement onto the island is a bunch of trickery because the islanders, they know they know who you are before you get off. They knew my social security number before I got off the boat, is what I used to say. And the UCs and John came over, and he was running the group. And these knuckleheads thought it was okay to go out on the beach and drink. So they're out on the beach drinking. Nobody at the station knew they were there except for me and my partner, and one of the sergeants. We didn't even let our lieutenant know these guys were there. And he's out there and with his crew, they're on the beach drinking, looking to buy dope from people and a couple of reserves. It was a weekend. We had a reserve team over there. They jammed them up and they had to come clean to the reserves. It was funny because you knucklehead.
Well, the island policing would be similar to what we're talking about in Tyler, Texas here. Let's roll the next scene. And I got cooking meth here. I don't know if he was actually cooking meth here, but maybe ecstasy. This guy was this thin guy, and the gal goes there to buy it by herself. I'm struggling with this. She's completely by herself. She goes in here, and of course he makes her take stuff, and he puts it in his mouth and puts it in her mouth by kissing her. And first of all, I initially thought this was meth, but I don't remember seeing meth in pill form. For me, it was always kind of a crystal form. Maybe there was crank that was more of a powder kind of look, but he is cooking something there. You think it's ecstasy? And again, we're at this place where he expects you to use, Marty. So UC's face this challenge. Of course, she's by herself, which I have a problem with. But have you been pushed to use to show your credibility?
You know what? Sometimes, I mean, not really pushed. I've never encountered that. And speaking to Tony, just on a very few occasions, are you really pushed to use in front of them? I mean, it does happen. And you just, if it takes leaving the deal, you walk away. I've never known anybody to sit there and use, but I mean, if you got a gun pointed at you, sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But that's few and far between. I think that based on her reaction to the drug and the era, it might almost be like a Quaalude type of drug. Is that what he was cooking up? And Quaaludes were very popular in the 60s and 70s and very popular with Bill Cosby, as I understand.
Only when he had a date.
Yeah. So, but as far as being forced to use, I think it's a little over dramatic in this, but certainly happens, and I'm sure narcs listening to this will say, I got it happens, but it's I don't think it's as common as might be portrayed in the movie.
Right. And I think as I looked up, this was the story true that the police chief, both these people, Patrick's character and Jennifer, her character, they both ended up going to a federal prison for a while, and all of their cases people were exonerated. The guy that is represented as Gans, as Greg Allman is in this movie, same thing. He was arrested, and it was allegedly a ginned up case pushed by the chief, and he got out again. And there's a lot of documentation on what was true and what was not true. But I even still, and the chief said, hey, there was a 2-part interview with him. He said, no, this is all, a lot of this, we would have known if they were under the influence, but I don't know how much of that is true or not. I do think they probably did use, I mean, they went to federal prison, they lied about stuff. So I think that some of this is actually true. But here, let's get to the scene where we talk about addictions, the addicts. And Danny, I wanted to, there's a scene where she's kind of crawling around on the ground looking for a rock or whatever she's looking for. And I did hear this story from Tony. People get so addicted that they debase themselves so much, and they're just pursuing that next high. And it's hard for me to look at 2 cops getting so addicted and so into that drug culture, and so where they just need that next hit, and that's their biggest thing. I would think that if this was true life, that would have been recognized. But when I saw her crawling on the ground looking for a rock, that was real to me based upon the stories and based upon having to hit shooting galleries, help narcotics hit shooting galleries. I will tell you, the first warrant where I helped narcotics hit a shooting gallery, that was my decision. I'm never going to narcotics. It was like, oh my God, these people, the way they're living, they don't have heat in this place. It's hotter than hell. No way am I doing this. They can have this job. But talk about the addiction and people getting so into the addiction that they forego everything else in their life.
It's like an addiction to alcohol or any addictions. In this scene there, to me, it portrayed more as she was starting to go through withdrawals. And so she's really desperate on getting that next hit or that next high. And I've seen that, especially like we go back to the jails when guys, they'll get arrested on a Friday night, and on Sunday morning they're going through withdrawals, and they'll do anything they can to get that next high. What I saw a lot of this in patrol up in Lancaster is the girls who would go out and prostitute themselves for money so they can get their old man high. And that was just something I couldn't fathom that at all. It was hard to see, but that was very common up there. And so I've seen people through the alcohol that would be the same way. But Marty and I, we alluded to this at the beginning. We have a mutual friend who was an undercover or UC, and I would suspect that he probably was using while he was buying, or was using when he was buying. I would suspect that when he came to patrol and we were working together, he was probably high half the time. But unfortunately, fortunately, he got caught. He was terminated and later on passed away. But that was all due to addiction. And he never worked through it. I've worked with guys who had gotten hurt on duty. And one guy, his addiction to prescription painkillers was so bad that he was ripping off prescription pads back when they went that way, was ripping them off and forging them just to feed his addiction. So it's addiction is a very scary thing. It takes they say 28 days to break an addiction. I would say it's probably longer than that, but it's scary.
So I have a real problem with our policy where we're much more accepting of people's usage, because I think as we see now, we see skyrocketing overdose deaths with fentanyl, which is 50 to 100% stronger than heroin. But we also see an increase in overdoses due to meth too. So, which we don't talk about that in the age of fentanyl. I think in 2022 we had 100,000 deaths nationally of just fentanyl and methamphetamine alone. But we're not talking about the people whose lives are completely destroyed. They may still be alive, but they're not really living, right? Right, Marty? You've been to shooting galleries where you see people so debased on drugs that they almost don't act human, you know?
Well, yeah, and it's progressed. Well, first of all, I thought Jennifer Jason Leigh was looking for Hunter Biden's Parmesan cheese on the carpet. but I digress. Yeah, and in fact now there's a lot of video. If you'll watch the news, I forget the name of the drug that's currently going on. It's a synthetic heroin opiate, and the shooting galleries are now on the street. They're for everyone to see. You don't have to go to the movie theater to watch a dramatic shooting gallery. Just drive down, where the Weingart Center is, and Skid Row,
Sixth and San Pedro,
and they are out in public, high, and they look like their bodies look like question marks because of the drugs symptoms, and so, but yeah, you take that into houses, and houses, I mean, what you see on the streets in these homeless encampments, that's what the interior of these houses would look like. And especially, I mean, I hate to dog on the North County, but Danny's probably seen some horrible things up there. And because I've been up to that North County, and people living in trailers and stuff. There's an area, and Danny's, when I was working homicide, I went out there for the first time, called Llano.
Yep.
Lano.
Out in the middle of nowhere.
Out in the middle of nowhere, and it's a literally, Pat, a third world country. There, it's an enclave of trailers. They truck in their water. They use generators. There's no electricity or power being brought in unless they steal it from the high tension wires. And but that's here in the United States. It was like I didn't. Where it was, I couldn't believe it. So, it's pretty bad. These.
Yeah, that's why I moved from northern Los Angeles County to now northern San Diego County. Much nicer.
Well, I have to tell you, like you heard me say, I was in San Diego just recently, and they're doing a good job in downtown dealing with the homeless. And I'm on the board of the LA Mission, and I was down serving meals and for Thanksgiving. And you're right. You see these folks walking around, and it's if you ever watch the movie The Walking Dead, the television show, that's what it's kind of like. They're just kind of
zombies,
and I have a real problem with it because it also people are dying in the streets because of this stuff, and I blame Gaston for that.
Yeah.
So
that Prop 47. I mean, I don't want to get off topic and on a tangent, but we all know what was drug court. If it wasn't working, it was holding the line, because it was making people have some accountability to some extent. You had to go to jail a lot of times before that even occurred. But at the end, if you wanted to remain out, you were forced to help yourself. And
it was, I say those policies, incremental, we had incremental successes with drug courts and other stuff, but right now we're not having any successes. Their policies are failing. Let's get into the next thing that I noticed, and it's paranoia. I think that came out in this movie, and I think maybe Danny, you can explain this, but when you're a chronic user of methamphetamine or cocaine, things happen, right? Your brain changes, right? And I can certainly tell stories about the paranoia people who are chronic users of cocaine and meth. Do you want to tell a story about that or talk about it?
It's inherent with alcohol. Or alcoholics, stone cold alcoholics are very paranoid. With methamphetamine, they don't trust meth freaks. They don't trust anybody. They're just, even when they're not high, they're constantly paranoid. And it's bizarre because when I was trying to buy meth from them, even with an introduction, they wouldn't sell because they just was paranoid, and they'd be afraid of their own shadow. Just about. It was kind of hilarious. But yeah, that's one part of addictions. It does change your brain waves, kind of misfire and stuff, and you become totally different from what you are. You don't think clearly. You think everybody's out to get you. These are the same people that think that the Twin Towers fell down because the government made them fall down, not because some enemy crashed airplanes into them. But that's how these people think. They're just weird.
Well, here we got Jason Patrick with a shotgun, and he thinks they're coming for me, right? And I got a call it was a high-end hotel in West Hollywood on Sunset, and I meet this guy in the lobby, and he's wearing a shirt like I am, just button-down shirt with a pocket, and he comes up and he tells me, the Pittsburgh Mafia is after me. They're going to get me. They're trying to kill me. And, of course, we're in California on the Sunset Strip, and I could see the baggie just in the pocket, and it's nice, look like an 8-ball or whatever, just sitting in his pocket. And I just say to him, well, you know what? You're right. They are in the area. How about let me pretend like I'm going to arrest you and take you to jail so I can get you out of here so they can't get you. And so, of course, I hook them up, take them to jail and stuff like that. But that's what I'm talking about. That paranoia does exist, right, Marty? It does happen with chronic users. Have you seen it and you want to address it?
Yeah, the two most pronounced things that I associate with chronic meth users is paranoia and sex toys. For some reason, every warrant that I served on a meth dealer or meth user and had a sex toy there, a big, large sex toy. And I don't know what they used it for, but they all seem to have it. It wasn't a successful search warrant unless you recovered a bag of dope and a sex toy. So yeah, but paranoia.
I want to add on to that too.
Paranoia is a strong component of basically any addiction, or you just when you get into the your mental state has been altered and you're involved in criminal activity, they're out to get you. Someone's going to come and get you. And that's why you're always, are you the police? Are you the police? And no. But yeah, so it's kind of, it manifests itself in the chronic use manifests itself in this manner. But
well, I just noticed because we dealt with mostly meth in West Hollywood, and then of course cocaine. And it just a lot of these guys had paranoia, and particularly if they're chronic users, that they had paranoia. Danny, you wanted to add on to that comment?
Yeah, up in the North LA County, in the 90s, meth was huge. They were cooking. There were labs all over the place. But one thing that I noticed working patrol, narco, and gangs was the correlation between child abuse and methamphetamine abuse. And at the time, methamphetamine, first and second arrest for methamphetamine, they were being charged with misdemeanor dope instead of felonies. And also at the time, Steve Cooley was the head DA for the Antelope Valley Court, or the DA's office. And I talked to him about it one time, and he was telling me he wanted to file them as felonies, but his bosses, which was, I believe, Gil Garcetti, all methamphetamine throughout LA County was being filed as misdemeanors instead of felonies, which was a great misjustice because you got a guy doing dirty deeds with kids, and he is, you just can't prove it, but he gets hooked up on a misdemeanor charge, does 3 days in jail, and he's back home again on probation. And that just didn't fit well. I know when Steve became DA, he changed the rules a little bit and tightened that part up. But it
So
was,
they
it
handle it as
bothered
a
me.
wobbler, so you could arrest as a felony, but they would only charge and give the
Correct. It
deal
was,
as a misdemeanor, right?
they were wobblers. And
All
it
right.
was just sad because you'd see it. And, one of the hardest things that, Marty alluded to what they do with these toys. One of the hardest things I had to do was, as a patrol deputy, I rolled up to a house and I was the assisting unit, where the boyfriend had sodomized a 6-month-old baby, and the baby died. And he was not in custody. He was in the interview room, or not even in the briefing room at Antelope Valley Station. And I had to sit there with this guy for an hour until homicide got there to arrest him. And it was, the feelings you want, because he was higher than a kite. He was tweaking, and it was just terrible. So
Yeah, and that's that's why I do have a problem, because you can take people to jail for these drug things, and it does prevent other things. But I have to say, when you say tweaking, because there was so many, I remember I had a trainee, and he says, "What are we gonna?" I said, "Hey, we're gonna go find a tweaker," and it took me 10 minutes, and he's just sitting on a bus bench, and the guy's doing this, and you go, "Oh, there's one right there." You could just find them if you knew where they hung out at. I mean, you didn't have to. I didn't have to check their eyes to know that they were tweaking, but yeah, that does happen, right?
It was like working in East LA, and you want to go find a duster. All you got to do is look in the street corner and look at some guy looking up at the red light, trying to figure out what that is.
Or go find a hype, I mean, heroin addict. I mean, and they're sitting at the bus bench and they're on the nod. Their head is hitting their chest. And
what was that? Floreland Ford, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's we're still fighting the same battle. It's actually exploded now. I mean, what we were holding the line back in the day when Danny and I and you, Pat, were out patrolling and trying to address community concerns, quality of life issues, by taking these burglars and these other ancillary crimes that they're involved with, by addressing the addiction or the possession. And now there's none of that is occurring, and we've seen the results of that. I mean, the lie that prisons are filled with, just drug users and so forth. That was just a bold-faced lie. They were at least there was a means to get them clean or some treatment, as menial as it might have been, but it was something as opposed to nothing now. And look at what the results are.
Yeah, I used to work hypes to knock down the burgs in West Hollywood, and then I became a bird detective. But so if you took hypes to jail, you got less burglaries. That's just the way it worked, right? And that's reality. But in this show, they finally come clean to their bosses that they're hooked, right? And the chief doesn't really care. He says, "Okay, well, let's pray, but I still want you to get our main guy." And a couple of things I wanted to hit up with you guys before we get into our final 15 minutes. First of all, praying. I'm a man of faith, but praying doesn't. Just praying doesn't take away addiction, right? There is a treatment regimen. Our goal is to get people in treatment. In this case, it's a couple cops, but we need to get them in a structured program if people are going to be successful in overcoming addiction. For the most part, in my opinion, and I'll throw this one to you, Danny, you don't just kick that habit. You need some support to do it, right?
It's a long, arduous journey, and it's like I said, they tell you that it takes 28 days to kick an addiction. No, it's much longer than that, because it's a mindset. It's the physical portion. It's the mental portion that you got to get through. Now, in the movie, they kind of alluded that Sergeant Dodd or Lieutenant Dodd, who was the boss, that he was a narco cop earlier.
Yeah, Elliot.
That's his name. Yeah, that he was a narco cop, and he had a drug problem, and that he kicked it. And it didn't really come out and say it. It eluded it pretty good, and I kind of I get it, but in modern or in real day law enforcement, there would be something totally different than, okay, you're hooked. I mean, in the 80s and the 90s, they'd fire you. Hopefully now they'll find some kind of treatment for you. Who knows?
One of the things, and I'll throw this one at Marty, that they say about cops, because I was reading those editorials. I told you I did a show where I went through the LA Times and other editorials where one of them said, "Oh, these guys just want to go back to headbanging." We were talking about the DA's race here in LA. And I thought, how offensive can these guys be? When I was working, whether I was arresting somebody for dope or, and particularly dope, I thought, God, I got to get this guy off the street to save his life. There's a certain amount of doing this job because we have compassion for our fellow man, which seems to get ignored on the editorial pages. But, as you said, we were holding the line. What that means is we were saving lives. And now we see overdoses spiking and people dying. And that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah. And I think every good cop that has an interaction with, whether it be a suspect, a victim, an informant, once you humanize who you're dealing with, we all came into this profession out of our sense of humanity and bettering our community. And when you humanize somebody, then you can empathize with them. And then that starts a dialogue where possibly redemption can occur. So, and I think any and I've used this term several times, communication. So it's talking, and that's what cops do. Cops are constantly talking, and I mean, and we can't paint everyone with the same brush, but for the vast majority, in my 42 years, everybody wants to help, or most cops want to help people. And and there's a sense of humanity. So whether it be the suspect or whatever, I mean, and even in times when Danny was alluding to, and homicide, I had many occasions of that when I hate this person, but it's still a human being, and you got to treat them with some modicum of respect. But I mean, and that's what gets lost in what the narrative, the false narrative that we want to go back to headbanging and all that. No, I think that the biggest failure of this movie, what was more glaring to me, and Pat, maybe you can relate because as you start to promote, is the failure of supervision. I mean, just that I guess Sam Elliott's character just wasn't there enough, wasn't on top of it. And then when the signs, the red flags were thrown up, he was going to handle it because, as Danny alluded to, because of his past, how he handled it. But it did the characters no favors in the end.
Well, he was under pressure to make it happen, right? And all of them were, and there's danger in that, and that's where Sam Elliott should have pushed back. Hey, he isn't. I would have, having had to work the clubs in West Hollywood, I would have understood that these guys are keeping 2 or 3 layers between them if they're involved in the dealing, because they're making so much money on alcohol, which I'm sure that's what in this case, Greg Allman's case was. Hey, I don't need to get. That's not my primary source of, or is it something that's long? And here's the other thing. That's why the mafia avoided narcotics, long sentences. So there's a lot of reasons why he's probably not doing it, or at least he's not. You're not going to catch him easily, and they do that. They eventually try to buy from him, and we can show that. Greg Allman's scene. This is one of the few times he actually says something in the movie. Martin, let's roll that scene, and he refuses to sell to them. And have you ever had a case, Marty, where the guy is a smart guy, and he just you couldn't make a case on him because he refused to sell, and he was very restricted on who he sold to, or he just wasn't in the business, and you just got bad information. You just somebody that just wouldn't sell to you.
Well, I ordered some heroin up, and a Mexican national came to deliver it, and I had the informant who introduced me to the dealer nearby, and so he was refusing to sell when he saw me. I guess I was too big and too fat to look like a heroin addict. So the informant, luckily, she was in the area. She took over and she browbeat the guy verbally, and then she left, and he just sold to me. So yeah, I've had that, but I had a little assistance in that incident. So
Yeah, we should talk about informants. Any of your informants get socked up for being informants, or put in real danger for having helped you guys out?
yes, I've had informants do that, but most of the time it's because they put themselves in danger after you've kind of admonished them and done everything you can to keep them safe. I mean, because you build a relationship with an informant, and your goal is to keep them safe as well, but they kind of similar to the movie. They deputize themselves almost, and they start working to finish the job and make you look good and so forth. So yeah, you have to really monitor that and keep them in check.
So they could be overzealous as well.
Yeah.
What about you, Danny? Any of your informants get a little out there, and you were
A lot
concerned
of
with
them.
their safety? A lot of them?
A lot of them. But what I used to tell my informants, since most of my informants were working off cases, is I'd go, you go out, you serve a search warrant, you risk your life, you find a couple of bundles of coke, you bring the guy in, he doesn't have a record, so you flip him so he'll work for you. And I always tell him, don't turn in 5 guys that you like or that you've got to have 10 enemies out there that you don't like. We'll get those guys, okay? Don't go after your friends. And so that kind of worked for me, because I knew that the suspects didn't like the informant, or they didn't get along. So but he'd make the deal, and the informant never hung out with him, so he didn't have any worries, or too many worries. But I had guys get thumped up.
Well, this was so in a small town, their informant, and ultimately he introduced them to all of his friends, like you're talking about, and friends and family. And his way of dealing with it was to commit suicide, which they show in the show. And I don't know if that's true or not. When I was reading on the true story, I didn't see anything like that in the literature. But the next thing is the roundup, and I can tell you, if I had worked jailer that day and narcotics was coming in with 50 people that they were rounding up, I was never happy, because then you're printing all these guys, right? And they just dump them in your cell. Narcotics and vice, they come with a lot of people, and you got to print all these guys. But that was actually fairly true. We go out, you do months of an operation, then you do a bunch of warrants, and you go hit a bunch of locations, right, Marty? That's kind of how you do it.
Yeah, although this was the most unrealistic part of the movie that I saw, these roundups occurred just like this. OSS gang warrants, we round up people, narcotics. We do operations like this, and they'd culminate with a large quantity of arrests, but never would the informants be involved in the takedowns, or be walking through the cells where multiple suspects. I mean, and I don't even think that would occur in the 70s. That was beyond the pale as far as reality. So,
well, legally, you're tipping them off on who was the one. You know what I mean? Because at this point, they generally don't know who they sold to that has caused the takedown, and you don't really want them to know that right away. Right,
no.
And so I mean, so legal.
That's
So you're right.
discovery is for. You can.
You don't want them to know that until you go to court.
Yes, until they do the discovery, and then what at the arraignment or the preliminary hearing, right? Yeah, so that then they can hear it, do their motion to suppress or whatever else they're going to do, and but yeah, they do their roundup, and I guess the chief has his big day in front of camera. That does happen too, right, Marty? The big day, you don't see the chief until the press conference, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, well, we do those all the time. That's a systemic part of law enforcement. Is we have to we have to pat each other. All the executives have to pat each other on the back for a job well done. That they.
All right, okay, I'm blushing here again. Go ahead.
That they took part in. I mean, but yeah, it yeah, that occurs. You know, you have to announce it. I mean, and for transparency purposes, and for the notification to the public that your tax dollars are actually at work. You know, I mean, so there's a need for it. I mean, I'm not saying there's not a need for it, but certainly for the grunts or the foot soldiers, they don't need to be out front doing that. Leave it to the admin pogues to.
That's why you guys got paid the big bucks.
Yeah.
That's
But it is,
Ah.
you go into these communities. Everybody thinks that South Central is just one big toilet. It's not.
not
Okay.
it's not.
Compton is actually a pretty decent town. A small percentage, maybe 5% of the people make that town look bad. Same thing with Linwood. Linwood's a pretty decent town. And so for the good people that live there, they want to see these press conferences. They want to know that they're getting their bang for their buck.
Yep.
And so I a couple of times when I was at Compton, I got volunteered to do the press conference. They're always fun when you're doing a live press conference.
That's
I
because
avoided them.
you reflect the demographics of Compton quite well.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm going to leave that one alone.
Well, I grew up in the city of Detroit. When I went to work down Compton, I thought, wow, this reminds me of the neighborhood I grew up in, right? And there were a lot of really nice houses and stuff like that. And but yeah, it was a very small percentage of the population that and just for clarity, Marty, Detroit was 10 times the size of Compton, but it was Compton basically.
Yeah.
And so hey, let's get to the last scene. It's the shooting, and this is where somebody does come to their house, and he's this was unrealistic where they're doing the shotgun on her face or whatever. Obviously it was dramatization. I just can't believe this would happen. Again, if they're going there to shoot him, they're going there to shoot him. If they're going, and then they end up having a shooting, and Jason Patrick's character gets shot. Now, one of the things, if I was doing this business, I would want to be armed with a shotgun myself too. So at least I can give a little bit of chops to Jason Patrick's character that he's got a shotgun. That's the weapon I would like to use if I was in a close quarter combat in a house, the shotgun. But the fact that they were able to get in, they knew where they lived at. The shooting is although, in the real life situation, they did come to a house and the partner did get shot. So in the real life story, the narcotics officer did get shot, although he recovered. He was seriously injured. He managed to recover. So a portion of the shooting story did actually happen, which just tells me these guys, in today's world, these guys would be seen as amateurs. You want to comment on the shooting, Marty, and the fact that this was actually based upon real life situation?
Yeah. So obviously, I think we can all agree that at this point the movie's taken a turn and the trend is downward. I mean, so the case is over, yet they've maintained their relationship. They're still living together, and they're living in a house that obviously they were living in when they were in the midst of their operation. So, kind of reality kind of takes a back seat once again. But nonetheless, obviously she was intuitive enough to realize that the movements of the shotgun were a tell from Mr. Gaines when she saw him in court, and decided that she was going to perjure herself and to exact revenge, based on the hand movements he did in court and the way the shotgun was manipulated on her face. So, yeah, I mean, in that regard, as far as filmmaking, that was kind of a cool little thing, but I don't think it was based in any part of reality. So
yeah, I agree with that. Danny, I'll give you a chance to comment, and then we'll close up. Okay.
All right. Yeah, the blowing up of the female artery, that was kind of cool. That was a good shot, but the blood stains, that was kind of hokey. But to me, that was the most action in the whole movie, and it was boring. But the best part of the movie was when they were playing Wasted Days and Wasted Nights by Freddie Fender.
Freddie Fender, yeah, I agree.
That was the best part.
Yeah, they did have some good music in here, and like I said, I was a fan of Greg Allman, and it's interesting. Him and his band suffered addiction. He ended up testifying in court against a dealer I want to say it was 5 Keys that was part of their security detail, and his brothers and the rest of the band wouldn't talk to him because they thought he was a snitch. So he, in real life, they were deeply in the drug culture, him and his band, the Allman Brother Band. He was married to Cher, and so
Well, he was a rambling man.
He was a rambling man. Lord, I was born a rambling man. And so, hey guys, thank you for coming on my show. This was, I hope you enjoyed the show, Marty, and you'd be willing to come back.
Sure, I really enjoyed it. Thank you for having me, and it was good to see old Coon Dog up there. When we're off camera, I could tell you some good stories that are very interesting. Some of them might include a duck. I'm not sure.
Okay, that one definitely probably needs to be off screen. But here we are. We're closing up. Stick around for a debrief, Marty. We'll talk off screen, off air for a few minutes. And Martine, you can take it away.